What happens when arrogance meets humility in a high-end restaurant? Some moments expose a person's true character, and what happened that night in an upscale diner left everyone stunned. A simple tip led to a shocking twist no one saw coming. Please subscribe to our channel and tell me in comments from where are you watching this video. The restaurant was one of those places where the chandeliers gleamed and the air smelled of luxury. Soft piano music played in the background, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the room. Sandra Bullock, dressed in an elegant yet modest outfit, had chosen this place for a quiet dinner after a long day. She wasn't looking for attention, just a peaceful evening. She sat at a corner table scanning the menu with a gentle smile, while the waiter, a young man with a neatly pressed uniform but an air of arrogance, approached her table. He didn't seem overly impressed by her presence. In fact, he treated her just like any other guest, not with warmth, but with cold professionalism. Sandra ordered a light meal, enjoying her time alone. She wasn't one to flaunt her status, and she certainly didn't demand special treatment. But something about the waiter's attitude felt off. His smirk, his dismissive tone, the way he barely made eye contact. As the evening progressed, another customer entered. A middle-aged woman dressed simply, her eyes filled with hesitation. She wasn't there to dine lavishly. She approached the counter and in a soft voice asked if she could get a small portion of food. It was clear she was struggling, maybe even homeless. The waiter glanced at her, his expression turning from boredom to disgust. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "This is a 5-star restaurant, lady. We don't give out free meals." His voice carried across the room, making heads turn. Sandra watched in silence, her hands tightening around her fork. The woman's face turned red with embarrassment, but she remained dignified. "I can pay, just not much," she whispered, holding out a few crumpled bills. The waiter scoffed. "That won't even cover a glass of water here." He looked at her as if she was nothing, as if her presence alone was an inconvenience. Before Sandra could react, another voice cut through the tension, calm yet firm. "Give her whatever she wants. I'll take care of it." The entire restaurant turned toward the source of the voice. A man in a dark suit, relaxed but commanding, stood near the entrance. Keanu Reeves. His presence alone shifted the energy in the room. The waiter's smirk faded. Keanu stepped forward, pulling out a chair for the woman, as if she were royalty. "Please sit," he said gently. "Order anything you like." The woman hesitated, eyes wide. I don't want to cause trouble." Keanu smiled. "It's no trouble at all." The waiter looked irritated but had no choice. He scribbled the order, barely hiding his annoyance. Sandra watched the scene unfold, a quiet admiration in her eyes. By the time the meal arrived, the woman was on the verge of tears, whispering her gratitude to Keanu. But the night wasn't over. When the bill came, Keanu reached into his wallet and handed the waiter something extra, something that made the entire restaurant gasp. The waiter's face paled. He wasn't holding a small tip. It was $50,000. Silence filled the air as Keanu met the waiter's stunned gaze. "That's your tip," he said calmly. "But not for the service. Consider it a lesson." Sandra smirked, pushing her own tip across the table. A modest amount, just enough to be fair, but the message was clear. It wasn't about how much you give. It was about how you treat people. And just like that, the night took a turn no one would forget. The restaurant was silent. The weight of Keanu's words hung in the air, pressing down on the waiter like an invisible force. He stood frozen, his fingers gripping the edge of the check, staring at the $50,000 tip as if it were a trick. The arrogance that had once colored his face was gone, replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe even shame. Keanu, however, wasn't looking for gratitude or spectacle. His eyes shifted back to the woman still seated, her hands trembling slightly as she picked at the food on her plate. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. For the first time that night, the woman truly looked at him. Really looked. There was no barrier of fame, no sense of hierarchy, just a man who saw her, not as a burden, but as a person. "You don't have to be afraid to eat," Keanu said softly, his voice carrying warmth. "Enjoy your meal. Take your time." The woman hesitated, then slowly nodded, taking a small bite. It was clear she hadn't had a proper meal in a long time. Sandra, watching from across the room, felt something stir inside her. She had seen many acts of kindness in her life, but this was different. It wasn't just generosity, it was a moment of humanity. of making someone feel worthy. Keanu leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so that only the woman could hear. "What's your name?" She swallowed, hesitating before answering. "Margaret." "Margaret," Keanu repeated, as if committing it to memory. "How did you end up here tonight?" Her eyes flickered with something raw. I used to work, had a job at a small bookstore, but things got tough. Rent went up, and I couldn't keep up. One bad thing led to another, and here I am." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "I didn't want to beg. I just wanted something to eat." Keanu's expression didn't change, but there was something behind his eyes. Understanding. He nodded slowly. "You know, life has a way of throwing curveballs at us. One moment, everything's fine. The next, it feels like the ground disappears from under you." Margaret's eyes watered, and she quickly wiped them with the sleeve of her worn-out coat. "I didn't expect anyone to care," she admitted. Keanu smiled gently. "There are more people who care than you think. Sometimes we just need a reminder." The waiter, still standing near the table, seemed different now. The smugness had drained from his face. He cleared his throat, stepping forward hesitantly. Sir, He struggled for words, looking at Margaret, then back at Keanu. "I shouldn't have treated her that way. I was just doing my job, but that wasn't right." Keanu met his gaze, his expression unreadable. "No one's perfect," he said simply. "But what matters is what you do next." The waiter swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Then, to everyone's surprise, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his own wallet. He took out a few bills, not much, but enough, and placed them on the table in front of Margaret. "It's not much, but I hope it helps," he muttered. Margaret looked at the money, then up at him. Her lips trembled, and she gave a small, watery smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu leaned back in his chair, a look of quiet satisfaction on his face. A simple moment, but a powerful one. As the night wrapped up, Keanu took care of the bill, ensuring Margaret had a warm meal to take with her for later. Before he left, he gently squeezed her shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Margaret, and don't give up." She nodded, clutching the small bag of food to her chest, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Sandra, now standing near the exit, met Keanu's gaze and gave him a knowing smile. "You have a way of turning a bad night into something unforgettable." Keanu chuckled. "It doesn't take much to be kind, just a little effort." As he walked out of the restaurant, the atmosphere had changed. Conversations resumed, but there was an unspoken lesson lingering in the air. Kindness wasn't about grand gestures or dollar amounts. It was about seeing people, respecting them. Margaret left the restaurant that night with more than just a meal. She left with dignity. And the waiter, once blinded by arrogance, had learned that true service wasn't about money. It was about humanity. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. What's the kindest thing someone has ever done for you? Subscribe for more heartwarming stories.